Hey, you guys, Erin here. I am back with another moon update for you. Today, I'm going to be talking about let's go with optimistic full moon we have coming up here on Thursday, May 23rd. This full moon peaks at 6:53 a.m. Pacific time, and I'm using that word optimistic because this takes place in the sign of Sagittarius, 2 degrees, 55 minutes. Sagittarius, which is really like the sign of optimism. Okay, so hopefully you guys are familiar with the routine at this point. This is the peak of a growth cycle that began approximately 6 months ago when we had a new moon in the sign of Sagittarius. Over these 6 months, we've all been experiencing this opportunity for growth that is related to this sign of Sagittarius. This is a time to honor that growth. Now, this is also a time, as soon as the moon, she's in her fullest form at 6:53 a.m. Pacific time on May 23rd. Okay, by 6:54 a.m. Pacific time, the moon's starting to wane. She's starting to get smaller. That's when we let go of any of this Sagittarius energy we may have picked up on that is not serving us, okay? So what I'm going to do in this recording is I'm going to break down this sign of Sagittarius for you in detail so you know what you're working with. I will also be talking, well, I'll pull up the chart and we'll go through all the other prominent astrological forces we are receiving for this full moon. There's actually a really, really strong combination of aspects between the sun and moon and Pluto. So I'm excited to point that out. But I will also be talking about certain parts of the body that are ruled by the sign of Sagittarius because these parts of our body become more sensitive anytime really anything transits through the sign of Sagittarius, but especially when it's a full moon in the sign of Sagittarius, and especially if you've got something really strong in your natal chart near 2 degrees Sagittarius. So it's a good idea to pay a little extra attention to these parts of our bodies for this kind of transit. So of course, I'll be mentioning some potential herbal remedies to help support these parts of our bodies. And I will also be talking about gemstones that resonate well with the sign of Sagittarius. What I always do every single full moon, pull out my journal, I write down the growth that I'm grateful for, I write down what I want to let go of, and then I like to take a few gemstones that resonate well with that zodiac sign or just the overall astrological forces we're receiving and put them on top of my journal. And I generally will leave them there overnight, and just there's so much flexibility here. Sometimes they'll get left on there until a couple weeks later when we have a new moon, that sort of thing. And I always leave a full extensive list of gemstones that resonate well with the sign the moon is transiting through in the description below, as long as you're seeing this here on YouTube. If you just click the description, if you scroll down, you'll see there's usually like 20 or 30 stones. And I get that list. Well, I have put those all together from several different books, but the Encyclopedia of Crystals by Judy Hall is where I get a lot of my information about this sort of thing from. Okay, now, one more thing I want to point out. Of course, we all experience this full moon at 2 degrees, 55 minutes Sagittarius as a collective, but it's also very, very unique to each and every one of us. Now, if you're somewhat familiar with your natal chart, or if you've had a reading with me, you can go back and review the video recording to see which area of your life this specifically manifests for you. Okay, which house in your natal chart does the sign of Sagittarius come through? If you're using Placidus or equal sign or whatever it is, a different house system other than whole sign, you're going to need to see where 2 degrees, 55 minutes Sagittarius comes through. When it comes to these lunar transits, personally, I just like working with the whole sign house system. I completely respect other house systems and I use them for other systems of astrology, but the whole sign house system just tends to show itself most accurately for me when it comes to these lunar transits. And if that's too much for you, that's perfectly okay. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, that's perfectly okay. Just take a step back and focus on the sign of Sagittarius in and of itself. But it is very, very beneficial to get familiar with our natal chart. Maybe you've got something, a planet or some kind of celestial body or something going on near 2 degrees, 55 minutes Sagittarius, or maybe opposing that in the sign of Gemini, or maybe squaring that in Pisces or Virgo. There's so much that could be said when we get familiar with our natal chart. So I do encourage people to get familiar with it. You can get your natal chart calculated for free on so many different websites these days. Okay, so let's leave that there. Let's get on to this sign of Sagittarius. This is what we call the mutable fire sign. When I say mutable, what I'm talking about is adaptability, okay? All the fire signs, Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, these are the signs that are most strongly associated with just overall energy, okay? But Aries is cardinal fire, okay? Forceful fire. Aries is the warrior of the zodiac, okay? Then Leo is fixed fire. meaning it's like Leo holds the heat in. Okay, but then Sagittarius, mutable fire. Think about the word mutate. Okay, it's like adaptable. It's kind of all over the place. I love the way Judith Hill describes the sign of Sagittarius as wildfire, because it is kind of wildfire, but it is a very optimistic energy. It's ruled by Jupiter. Okay, Jupiter is considered the great benefic. Okay, Jupiter influences things like luck and abundance and wisdom and philosophy, expansion. Jupiter is all about expansion. In this sign of Sagittarius, it can have a lot to do with expanding the consciousness. Okay, Jupiter even influences things like long distance travel, but mostly for the purpose of seeing how other cultures, how they are, and learning the big picture of the world. That's very Sagittarius energy. And in fact, it's a very faith-based energy. Jupiter influences things like faith. Okay, it's kind of associated with religion, but I'm always weary of saying that because it's not at all any particular, one kind of organized religion or something like that. It's more like the faith that comes through religions that this sign of Sagittarius and Jupiter are very strongly associated with. And when we picture the zodiac, Sagittarius is over here, Gemini's over here. They're always opposite each other in the zodiac. Gemini, which we have a ton of stuff that's about to enter into the sign of Gemini. And so happy solar return season to all you Geminis out there. I happen to have a lot of Gemini friends and I love all you guys so much. Okay, but Gemini focuses in on the facts. Okay, Gemini's the student that's always, zoning in on the little facts, versus opposite that, Sagittarius is much more faith-based and looking at the whole grand picture, the expanded version of it. Okay, so first of all, how have you grown in these ways? The motto for the sign of Sagittarius is I see. Okay, not necessarily seeing with your eyeballs. I mean, of course, that plays a role in it, but it's more like, again, seeing the whole grand big picture. It can also have a lot to do with being able to foresee. The sign of Sagittarius is represented by the archer. Okay, the archer that's always out on an adventure and kind of needs to be able to foresee. The archer that has high aims, really good high aims, okay? And in this very adventurous and optimistic way. In fact, if anybody knows anything about this, please do leave a comment. But I have heard, boy, I don't even remember who told me this. I didn't get it out of a book. It was actually an astrologer who told me, yeah, it was Lori, who told me that the word Sagittarius actually comes from the word sought, or to be seeking something. Okay, if anybody knows anything more about that, I'd love to learn about it. Okay, so how have you grown in these ways? Have you found a way to, maybe explore some things? Maybe you brought some adventure into your life. Hopefully you've got some sort of a faith, even if it's just pure spiritual faith. That's very Sagittarius energy, very philosophical. Maybe you've been trying to expand your consciousness and read about things that are of, other cultures and that sort of thing. Maybe you've been kind of trying to find optimism in your life, or maybe you've been getting more exercise. I'll go deeper into this later on in the recording, but the sign of Sagittarius actually rules the hips, and the femur. And a lot of people who got, say, a heavy dose of Sagittarius energy in their natal chart, they'll be really good runners. Okay, they're good exercisers. They want to go, 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 go. And in fact, that leads me into this. So, you hear all these wonderful things about the sign of Sagittarius, and you might be thinking, well, geez, what would I want to let go of that's related to the sign of Sagittarius? Well, it sometimes can be almost, I'll just tell you this. I am a Sagittarius rising. I'm grateful every day for that, because I've got really sort of like weepy sun and moon. I'm a Pisces sun, Cancer moon, and those are very sensitive, emotional energies. And hallelujah for my Sagittarius rising, because it does bring a lot of optimism. But I was always a runner my whole life. In fact, my little nickname in my yearbook was the runner. Okay, but we can have this with people who've got the Sagittarius energy. There can be this tendency to really have a difficult time holding still for a long time. I myself to this day cannot sit and watch a whole movie. I have to get up and do something. I will come up with an excuse to walk away from what, somebody, even just events, people coming together and having some sort of an event and everybody's sitting down, even silent meditation retreats, that sort of thing. I really struggled with just sitting there. Things like restless leg syndrome. I don't necessarily have that, but like constantly tapping the legs, that sort of thing. So maybe it's a little bit associated with like antsiness or just, I mean, honestly, it could even be associated with things like leg mania. Like I gotta just go, I gotta go. And that, if you picked up on maybe too much of that, maybe you've got a heavy dose of Sagittarius energy in your natal chart, and that's something that's going on for you. And that might be something that you want to let go of. Almost a little bit frivolous, fun, but a little bit frivolous energy we all receive through the sign of Sagittarius. And we all might be feeling a little bit of that with this full moon in the sign of Sagittarius. It really does depend so much on your own natal chart. Let's say you don't have anything in the sign of Sagittarius, nothing in the sign of Gemini, because Gemini is opposing Sagittarius. You might not notice anything, okay? But for those of you who do, I would pay attention to this. Okay, so there's that. How have you grown in these ways, and what do you want to let go of that's related to this sign of Sagittarius? Okay, so let me go ahead and pull up the chart here. For those of you who are new to my recordings, I work with geocentric Western astrology. So with that said, what we're looking at here is basically a snapshot of what we call the tropical zodiac at the time of this full moon. Okay, now with geocentric, that means we put Earth right here in the middle of this thing. And these symbols right here are the symbols for all the planets and these celestial bodies. When we go in the wheel a little way, these are the symbols for the zodiac signs that all these things will be beaming through onto Earth at the time of this full moon. Okay, so let's start with the moon, which is over here. The symbol for the moon is really easy to find because it just looks like a crescent moon. And this right here is the symbol for the sign of Sagittarius. Like I said, this is the archer, okay? It's the arrow. And at 2 degrees 55 minutes, this is really early in that Sagittarius energy. It's in the first decan, and it's kind of like very pure Sagittarius energy. It's very strong Sagittarius energy coming through. I would be mindful, because this is a full moon, I would be mindful about, say, again, if you've got something near in your natal chart, especially if it was like Mercury, because Mercury rules the mind and the mental function, near 2 degrees Sagittarius, there can be this tendency to maybe even have a hard time sleeping. Kind of like, oh, there's things I got to go do. I got to, sign of Sagittarius is fascinated by everything. Okay, so there's that. Now, you'll see over here is the sun at 2 degrees 55 minutes, Gemini. Anytime we have a full moon, it means the sun and the moon are exactly opposite each other in the zodiac. And so it's almost like they're facing each other. They're embracing all this growth that we've experienced, that sort of thing. But, something else I want to point out here real quick. If you take the time to look this stuff up for yourself and you don't live anywhere near California, then what you'll see is that the moon is still going to be at 2 degrees 55 minutes Sagittarius. The sun will be at 2 degrees 55 minutes Gemini, but the whole zodiac will turn based on your location. Okay, so just so there's no confusion there. All right, so the strongest aspect that I see that's really standing out to me is this right here is Pluto, which we see is at 2 degrees Aquarius. And we've spent a lot of time talking about Pluto entering into Aquarius because it's a very, very big deal. Pluto sometimes will take anywhere between 12 and 30 years to go through one zodiac sign. Well, Pluto just moved into the sign of Aquarius earlier this year. And if I'm going to be technical, it's actually the second time Pluto's done that. Pluto's still going to retrograde back into the sign of Capricorn one more time this year, which that should be very interesting. But for right now, Pluto is in the sign of Aquarius. And to kind of summarize this, Pluto will be going through the sign of Aquarius basically for the next 20 years, all the way till 2044. Okay, now, Pluto is the bringer of very powerful transformation. Okay, basically what Pluto does, not just transformation, it's also like transmutation. Okay, Pluto will, the energy of Pluto is like decay and then regeneration, or degeneration and then regeneration, death and rebirth. Okay, powerful energy. Pluto is often referred to as the planet of power. the power comes from that process of death and rebirth. Anybody who's been through a serious transformation, a serious death and rebirth process, as say people who have overcome drug problems or a tragic family situation, having to just being ripped apart and then come out on the other side and be empowered through that. That's a very Plutonian kind of experience. Okay, that's what Pluto influences. We're constantly receiving Pluto's energy, but sometimes Pluto's stronger than others. Okay, now the sign of Aquarius, okay, this is the fixed air sign. So all the air signs are very much associated with intellect. Aquarius, the fixed air sign, it's really kind of, let me summarize it this way. It's the sign that has so much to do with information. Okay, all the air signs can have to do with information and intellect. But Aquarius is often referred to as the genius of the zodiac because it's all about sharing information. And especially out of all the zodiac signs, the sign of Aquarius is very, very strongly associated with technology. Okay, and a lot of people have given a lot of readings to Aquariuses, and they're like, I don't understand. I hear that the sign of Aquarius is supposed to be good with technology. It doesn't mean you have to be good with technology just because your sun is in the sign of Aquarius. It's more the information that goes through. And in fact, the glyph here for the sign of Aquarius, it's like radio waves. That sign of Aquarius is all about, it's the water bearer who pours the water out, but the water is, when the water bearer is pouring the information out, okay, let me digress a minute here and make sense of this for you guys. The sign of Aquarius is represented by the water bearer. In astrology, water is emotions, okay? All the water signs are the emotional zodiac signs. Well, Aquarius is not a water sign, it's an air sign. It's associated with intellect, but it is the water bearer. What the water bearer does is detaches the emotions from the water and turns the water into pure information, and then pours that information, the water out, the information out, and water is always going to distribute evenly for all of humanity. This is why we're in this age of Aquarius and getting flooded with information through technology. Okay, that is that sign of Aquarius. Very, very dynamic energy. But so Pluto basically going through the sign of Aquarius for the next 20 years, we can expect to see a death and rebirth process involving things that are of a technological nature, things that involve information. Okay, I'm talking about AI, not only that, but the people connecting with computers, transhumanism, that sort of thing. I kind of feel like there could be a very strong potential over these next 20 years for something that involves the way that we get electricity. Okay, something that, and I'm kind of hoping for this if I'm being honest, something that completely destroys the way that we receive our electricity as of now and brings in some new way. I mean, wouldn't that be great if we could find some free energy? I personally think that there is plenty of ways to get free energy, but some genius will be able to get that technology to us at some point. That's my thought anyway. But okay, so that's Pluto and Aquarius. Now, here's the sun at 2 degrees Gemini, which again is another air sign. So this blue line that's going from here to here, clearly there's a couple blue lines, but the thicker one, that is almost an exact trine, 120-degree angle to Pluto. That is the sun sending harmonious rays to Pluto. Okay, that's the sun, the 120-degree angles. The sun is saying, hey, Pluto, let's have this conversation about what's going on here. And then here's the moon at 2 degrees Sagittarius, this green line that goes from here to here, that's a sextile aspect. It's approximately a 60-degree angle. And this is a really, really strong connection here because they're all at 2 degrees. Okay, now the full moon, she's in her fullest form, sending the sextile aspect, that's opportunity. Okay, that's basically an opportunistic connection going from the moon to Pluto. So we've got the moon sending in her fullest form, send in a very optimistic, very changeable sign, a mutable sign, sending these opportunistic rays up to the bringer of powerful transformation. And then we've got the sun in a changeable sign, in the mutable air sign, Gemini, sending harmonious rays to Pluto, the bringer of powerful transformation. This is just especially, okay, I'm going to put it to you this way. If you have anything in your natal chart, in any zodiac sign that is between two, I'm going to actually say between like, we could even go as low as 1 degree, but especially if it's at 2 degrees, if you have anything in any zodiac sign that's around 2 degrees, that thing is getting activated for this full moon because, well, it's got to be making an aspect with one of these guys. And it kind of gives this ability to shift into something new because the sun and the moon are both in these mutable, changeable signs. And then we've got the bringer of powerful transformation, the bringer of death and rebirth, all having this conversation. And if that's hitting something in your chart, it gives you a really, really good opportunity kind of to be able to even shift your karma, switch into something else, change the routine, that sort of thing. So I hope that makes sense. Okay. Now, I just do the best I can to describe this stuff. It's like I get it so clearly in my head, but sometimes I am challenged in finding the right words to really make sense of what I'm seeing. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to talk about, well, let's start with Mercury. So here's Mercury at 11 degrees Taurus. Now, this is great. Not that it's exalted or anything, but Mercury rules over our mental function and our nervous system and our communication skills, okay? Mercury is such a fascinating energy to understand. Now, in the sign of Taurus, Taurus is the fixed earth sign, okay? Taurus is stable, slow, steady, patient energy. I notice a lot of people who have their Mercury in Taurus, they have kind of an ability to think calmly. It's like they're not the type to get super anxious or wound up about something. They tend to almost like think calmly and speak calmly. Of course, there's not every single person who's born with Mercury in Taurus is going to be like that because there are things that can counteract that. But for the most part, that's a lovely, calm, mental function kind of energy. And if you've got anything in your natal chart near 11 degrees Taurus, the ruler of mental functions coming up and sitting on that thing and activating it for you. Okay, now the next one I want to point out is this beautiful conjunction between the two benefics. This right here is Venus. She's in her own home. She's Venus, to be clear, Venus will actually move into the sign of Gemini like 4 or 5 hours after this full moon. So this is Venus's little hanging out in the sign of Taurus before this full moon starts to wane. Okay, so Venus loves to be in the sign of Taurus because she rules the sign of Taurus. Okay, Venus is the ruler of the sign of Taurus. So when she's in the sign of Taurus, she gets to function the way she wants to. She gets to function the way that she naturally would. And that's with ease and sensuality and loving kind of energy, very harmonious, very lovely kind of energy we receive from Venus going to the sign of Taurus. Now, I think it was just a couple hours before, maybe it's the day before. Regardless, this right here is Jupiter, the great benefic, the ruler of this full moon. Okay, Jupiter is like the lord of this full moon because he rules the sign of Sagittarius. Full moon's in Sagittarius. Well, Jupiter, again, the great benefic, again, I think they're going to be basically exactly conjunct. Okay, here is Jupiter also at 29 degrees Taurus. Now, remember what I said about the sign of Sagittarius and Jupiter being they're the expanders. The sign of Sagittarius is a sign of expansion because it's ruled by Jupiter, who's the great expander. Anything Jupiter touches, he's going to expand it. Okay. And it's actually quite lovely because, so I say Jupiter is the great benefic. Venus is considered she's considered the lesser benefic, which I don't really like that because it makes her sound like she's not that. She's still very, very beneficial. Out of all those lights in the sky, Jupiter and Venus are really the ones that we get the most, what we would consider to be beneficial energies from. Okay, and there they are. I think it's the day before this full moon, or maybe just hours before this full moon peaks, that they go exactly conjunct. But still, at the time of this full moon, they're both at 29 degrees Taurus. They're only off by minutes from that exact conjunction. So I really, really like that. I think that's lovely. I would be mindful though, this is 29th degree. Okay, the sign of Taurus has a lot to do with food, has a lot to and rules the taste buds. Okay, and if you've got something in your natal chart near 29 degrees Taurus, okay, Venus rules sugar. Okay, a lot of people have a very strong Venus energy in their natal chart. And as I mentioned, Venus rules Taurus. A lot of Taurus people will have a sweet tooth. Or if somebody's just got a heavy dose of Venus energy in their natal chart, a lot of them will have a sweet tooth. A lot of people are born with Venus and Taurus will like things that are of a sweet nature. That's because Venus rules sugar. Well, Jupiter over here, he rules fat. Again, he's the expander. All kinds of fat is what Jupiter rules. And so these guys, the ruler of fat and sugar, together in the sign that rules over food, and at the 29th degree, that's the anaretic degree, this could potentially give somebody, if you've got something strong, especially if it's like your sun or even your moon near 21 to 29 degrees Taurus, you might all of a sudden just be craving, like, I don't know, cake with really thick layer of icing or something like that, with ice cream. I don't know, something like that, fat and sugar together. So that's something to just be mindful of. But overall, that's a beautiful, beautiful transit. I love when Venus and Jupiter go conjunct, really, in any zodiac sign. And like I said, just again, it's somewhere around 5 hours after this full moon. Venus will move into Gemini, which is a fun energy. I'll be putting out a new moon in the sign of Gemini video here in about a week and a half or so. And Venus, when you think about the influencer of love and harmony, the sign of Gemini, when Venus moves into Gemini, the ruler of love moves into the sign of Gemini. Gemini is such a fun, whimsical kind of energy. When I think of the sign of Gemini, I just think of almost like people spinning around. It's the mutable air sign, very intellectual energy, very hyper intellectual energy. The motto for Gemini is I think. Okay, so there's that. Now, and not only that, but just the 25th, I think it's just a few days, either 2 days or 3 days after this full moon, then Jupiter moves into Gemini. Jupiter's been in Taurus since May of 2023. So Jupiter's ride through Taurus is just about done here. I know so many Tauruses that have had extreme abundance since May of 2023. I cannot even tell you. Some have been a little bit harsh, but most of my Taurus clients and Taurus friends, it's so exciting to see what they have done with themselves while Jupiter was transiting through the sign of Taurus. Because again, Jupiter brings luck and abundance and wisdom and philosophy. Okay. We've also still got Uranus here going through the sign of Taurus. I think Uranus is there for about another year and a half or something like that. But Uranus is the bringer of abrupt changes, okay? Revolutionary changes. In fact, I put all this emphasis on the sign of Aquarius, which is kind of the rebel, it's like the genius rebel of the zodiac. Well, it's ruled by Uranus. Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, and that is in part what makes Aquarius what it is. Okay, it's a revolutionary energy that wants a change. Okay, now that's what Uranus. We're constantly receiving all of these. It's not like Uranus ever goes away. We're constantly receiving Uranus's energy, but Uranus was so strong over the last few months because Jupiter crossed over Uranus. Okay, and I saw a lot of very rebellious things going on, things that involve the way our food is grown, things that involve Taurus is also the sign of money. And there's obviously been all kinds of activity around that. Uranus, again, is still in the sign of Taurus. I think it's for another year. Sorry, I can't remember the exact time. Or I think actually Uranus is going to move into the sign of Gemini in 2025, but then retrograde back into Taurus for a little bit. But regardless, Uranus is bringing these very, very big changes to all things that Taurus rules. And they're kind of abrupt. Okay, now there's that. Let's see, where should we go next? Let's talk about these guys all bundled up together in the sign of Aries. So let's start with the North Node. The North Node, most of you know at this point, the North Node is like a pump that pumps celestial energy in. Okay, it's Rahu, it's the dragon's head, aggressive energy we get from the North Node, especially while going through the sign of aggression, the sign of Aries. Aries is the warrior of the zodiac. So we're all receiving this like really strong Aries energy through with the North Node going through the sign of Aries all the way until January of 2025. But it's really strong right now because here's Mars. Mars rules Aries, okay? Mars is the influencer of go, 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 go. Mars rules our muscles and our adrenal glands. The sign of Aries also has an influence on our adrenal glands and our muscles. And Mars is what makes Aries what it is, okay? Mars is the aggressor, dominant, masculine energy. Fires things up, especially while going through the sign of Aries. And they're right next to each other. The North Node bringing that energy in right next to Mars. This is very, very powerful, strong energy. If you've got, let's say, anything in your natal chart between, I'm going to go with 13, maybe even 12 degrees Aries, going all the way up to like 22 degrees Aries, that there's a lot of energy coming through there. Might want to be mindful of the head. Aries rules the top of the head. I can't tell you how many people, Aries sun and Aries rising. I'm talking, I got family members, clients, heard stories from other people about Aries who keep hurting their head while this North Node, especially while conjunct Mars. I don't mean to laugh, but it's just it's so spot on. Aries people, I wish I could tell this story, but they're personal stories about people, so I can't really. But I just will say that I know somebody very personally that fell down and totally smashed her face, and she's an Aries. She's totally fine. Everything's okay, but it just was so spot on. And again, I've heard so many other stories that are going on with the sign of Aries because the North Node's going through Aries, and now Mars is there too. Okay, now Chiron, the wounded healer, is also pretty darn close to Mars. In fact, Mars is getting closer and closer to Chiron. Chiron is the wounded healer, okay? Now, Chiron wants us to heal. At least the best understanding of, because I've heard a lot of little different perspectives on Chiron. I've even heard that Chiron could be associated with marriage. I think that was the Magi something or other. I can't remember where I heard that from. But for the most part, from my understanding of what I see in people's charts, when somebody's got a really strong Chiron in their natal chart, just as an example, say they were born when Chiron was just coming over the horizon, so many of these people become incredible healers. And that's where I'm like, okay, that really does make sense that Chiron wants us to heal. And going through the sign of Aries, the sign of self, the warrior, let's go. Okay, this is highly, highly activated. It really is a good time for self-healing, but it's also very aggressive energy because it's Mars and the North Node going through the warrior of the zodiac. Okay, enough of that. Now let's move on to Saturn here. So Saturn, the bringer of discipline and responsibilities. Saturn is literally like an old grouchy man. In Greek mythology, Saturn is Kronos, okay? And if I encourage everybody to learn about Greek. All the mythologies are just fantastic because they all apply to astrology, okay? But Saturn, Kronos is, the one that was devouring his children and just kind of a gnarly energy. That's Saturn, okay? We need Saturn. I don't mean to make Saturn sound all bad. We need him because he's the ruler of a huge ruler of our karma, clearly not the only ruler of our karma, but Saturn does have a major, major significance of karma in our lifetimes, okay? And it's the hard lessons in karma. It's the stuff that we got to go through that, sucks. And that's what Saturn influences, but we learn from it, okay? And even just little things like bookkeeping or keeping the house clean or just anything that involves responsibility that's very Saturnian. So the sign of Pisces, the mystic of the zodiac, the spiritual energy of the zodiac, very flowy energy, very has a lot to do with water. It's a water sign, especially like flowing water. Okay, Saturn is cracking his whip on this sign of Pisces, cracking his whip. If you've got anything in your chart near 18 degrees Pisces, Saturn's sitting on that thing, depending on what it is. It could, if it's Mars, you might want to be careful with your muscles. You might be experiencing tension in your muscles, that sort of thing. Or let's say it's your sun near 18 degrees Pisces or Mercury near 18 degrees Pisces. Whatever it is, Saturn's on that thing saying, we got some responsibilities to take care of here. But as a collective, I see this is such a wonderful opportunity. Saturn's going through the sign of Pisces all the way until early 2026. It's the end of February of 2026. Saturn will be in Pisces. And I see this as the collective, as a really good time to take our spiritual practices very, very seriously. Be disciplined with them. Okay, but it's also, Saturn going through Pisces can certainly bring like awareness to the sorrows in the world. Okay, especially if that's in something in your chart, because we're supposed to learn from that kind of thing. Okay, now moving on here to Neptune at 29 degrees Pisces. Neptune, I can't remember when he's going to go retrograde, but so Neptune is currently at the very, very last degree of the sign of Pisces. That's that anaretic degree. Okay, this is sometimes referred to as like the danger zone, but it's really, it's just such a powerful degree, that 29th degree. It's almost like an aggressive kind of energy, but it also can be kind of an energy of being a little like aggressively lost, if that makes any sense, especially when we're talking about Neptune in the sign of Pisces. Okay, the beautiful part about this is Neptune rules Pisces. Neptune is what makes Pisces spiritual. Neptune influences things of a very mystical nature. Okay, Neptune influences psychic capabilities. Neptune puts holes in our psychic boundaries. People who are born with a really strong Neptune in their natal chart can have an extremely powerful intuition, may even be considered psychic. Okay, but also Neptune can also make things, it's so dreamy, it's so mystical. Neptune is very unearthly. Okay, Neptune rules over things like drugs. Okay, Neptune rules over especially drugs that make us kind of, you know, say like some kind of an opiate or something that's just really muscle relaxers, that sort of thing. In the plant world, we'd say Neptune is very much associated with, you know, say cannabis. Saturn's also associated with cannabis, but that's because cannabis has so many minerals in it. Regardless, you get the point here. Neptune is like, woo, okay, kind of out to lunch. And the Pisces can be like that because it's ruled by Neptune. Okay, but at the 29th degree, this is like, oh my goodness, this is really, really, it's dreamy, it's mystical, but it's also, it can make people very sleepy, especially if this is hitting something in your chart. I just gave a reading to a 29 degrees Pisces a couple of days ago. She was absolutely lovely. But everything that I described about Neptune sitting on her sun, she was going, oh my gosh, yes. I'm a 28.5 degree Pisces. Neptune just went over my sun. Is that going to have to retrograde and go back over it and then move over it again? I did notice I was very, very sleepy, very just wanting to nap. And I'm not normally a napper, but there was days where I could not bring myself out of it. It didn't matter if I, you know, had like, normally when I'm feeling really tired, if I have a cup of green tea, it really does pick me up. But that wasn't doing nothing when Neptune was just right over my sun. And so if you've got anything near 29 degrees Pisces, that very well could be going on for you, but it's also a very, very psychic time. And not only that, but it's definitely a once in a lifetime opportunity. And what I do like about this is I do like the fact that Saturn and Neptune are both in Pisces at the same time, because I almost feel like Neptune in Pisces is making it so confusing for some people, easily manipulated. That's a good way to describe it. But Saturn's coming up and going, he's like trying to crack the whip on that a little bit. Saturn's like, it's time to get serious about this stuff. Okay, lastly, let's just touch on the South Node going through the sign of Libra. Okay, so as I've mentioned before, this is not my favorite transit, but it is what it is. We've got to experience it once every 18 years. The South Node will be in the sign of Libra till January of 2025. Okay, now Libra is the sign of balance and harmony and justice. In fact, my last name, Wage, actually, well, it's technically, it should be pronounced Vag. At least that's the best I could do at it. It's Norwegian. I think there's also in Germany, I think there's some Vag people in Germany. Okay, but regardless, it means fairness. It means it's the scales. Wage means the scales. It means balance. Again, my last name, Libra, is that sign of balance and fairness and justice. Okay. And that south node is like the drain point that, man, it's like taking some of that energy away. But it also could be, this could be a really good time if this is hitting something in your chart. If you've got something near 14 degrees Libra, especially if it's your sun, this could be a really good time for flushing things out, detoxifying on a physical level, but also on an energetic level. Okay. Especially if it's some kind of a partner. Libra is really the sign of you sharing your energy with somebody else. Let's say you've got some sort of a toxic relationship going on. It could be a really good time to flush that out if this is hitting something in your chart. Okay, so there's that. I think I might have gotten a little carried away on that, but we'll leave that there. Okay, so in the body, the sign of Sagittarius rules the hips, the thighs, the femur. Also has a little bit of an influence on the nervous system, but that's mostly the polarity that goes on between Gemini and Sagittarius. And as I mentioned, this is like a sign where, I mean, honestly, like I said, Sagittarius rising, this whole time that I've been making this video, my legs are kind of just, they just want to move around. So with that said, oh, and also the sciatic nerve, that's another major part. A lot of people who've got, say, their sun or their rising in Sagittarius, something going on in the sign of Sagittarius, a lot of these people will deal with sciatic nerve issues, a lot of them. Okay. And what I have found, because I also have, I don't necessarily have this anymore, but when I was younger, I had a pretty serious injury that really screwed up my sciatic nerve. And so what I found to work the best is blue vervain for sciatic nerve issues. But then also just for the kind of like, kind of like mania kind of energy, kind of like, I don't even know if that's necessarily the perfect word to use here, but the busybody, the kind of like always want to go. Wild yam can actually be really good for that. Can really be good for even like muscle spasms. Wild yam, the plant, wild yam. And then what was the other one I was going to mention here? Oh, lemon balm, which I should have grabbed. I just harvested a bunch of lemon balm and I started a lemon balm tincture. Lemon balm it's literally like what is usually considered like a weed. It just grows like crazy all over the place. I mean, I just know that I've been to a lot of different states and I've seen lemon balm growing in a lot of different states. Okay. And if it doesn't grow in your area, I mean, it's seriously, you can find it just going on a hike or whatever. And you know what lemon balm is because all you got to do is smell it. You just take a leaf and rub the leaf between your fingers and smell your fingers and it smells like lemons. Okay. And it's really good for the nervous system. It's really a very calming, can help people sleep. People who, this is also can be really good for people who've got a lot of Virgo or Gemini energy in their natal chart, could deal with anxiousness, that sort of thing. Lemon balm can be really, really good for that. But if your sun, let's say your sun or your Mercury is near, or even just in the sign of Sagittarius at all, as this moon is going over this moon in Sagittarius, full moon in Sagittarius is going over those things, you might find yourself having a difficult time sleeping. And lemon balm can be very, very helpful for that. You can drink it as a tea, a tincture. You can, I'm pretty sure, I've never bought it myself just because it grows all over the place here. But I'm pretty sure you could just buy it from, online or whatever as a dried leaf to make the tea with. I personally really like doing tinctures, but lemon balm is great for this kind of transit. Okay, now gemstones. The dedicated zodiac birthstone for the sign of Sagittarius is turquoise. So I put on one of my turquoise pendants today. Turquoise is so beautiful and so protective. Turquoise is absolutely one of the best stones that I can think of that's like good for everybody. Like I can't really think of a natal chart where a turquoise would be a no-no, where some very powerful stones are like, I don't know if you want to necessarily wear blue sapphire or whatever. But turquoise is one that's good, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like all reliable, good stone for everybody. Turquoise is great. I feel like, and not only that, but it's pretty darn affordable as well. Okay, now another one I want to point out is yellow sapphire, which I don't have. I've said this so many times. I will get myself a yellow sapphire. If you get the really good, high quality ones, they're not they're not so affordable, but they're gorgeous. And that is Jupiter's stone. Okay, I'm talking about a system that's called Upaye, and the Jupiter being Sagittarius' ruler, Jupiter's stone is yellow sapphire. So when we think about all those wonderful things that I'm talking about, Jupiter, luck, abundance, wisdom, philosophy, long distance travel, expansion of the consciousness, even things that have to do with like, say, publishing something that goes far and wide, that all those things can be enhanced by wearing a yellow sapphire. Okay. But if you say something as strong as you're a Sagittarius sun and rising or something like that, you might not, that might be overboard for you. You might be too much going on with that Jupiterian energy if you're wearing yellow sapphire. But overall, I'd say that's part of the reason that I want a yellow sapphire so bad, because I am a Sagittarius rising. And so it's a good stone, especially for Sag risings to wear for the most part. Okay, now the other stones I was going to mention here. All right, let's go with, let's start with these guys. Okay, these are, as I pulled up in so many videos before, these are probably my favorite stone. And these are super, super affordable. Okay, these are called Herkimer diamonds. No, they are not real diamonds, but what they look like. Let's see if I can get that to, I don't know. It's kind of fuzzy. Hopefully you guys get the picture here. They usually are going to come very, very clear like this. That's why they're called Herkimer diamonds, because at least the story is they were discovered by a bunch of miners in Herkimer, New York. And the miners thought that they hit the jackpot because they thought they found diamonds because these are so sparkly. But again, they're not. They're just some form of quartz. And there's this black stuff that is inside of there. That's what I love so much about these, is because they are very amplifying, really, really good for enhancing the intuition. I mean, I've had some very wild experiences hanging out with some Herkimer diamonds. But that black stuff in the middle of the stone is also there to provide protection. Okay, so they're amplifying, but they're also protective. And these are super affordable. You could get, I mean, the bigger ones might be, I don't know, $10 or something like that. But the little teeny tiny ones, which that's what I normally work with. If I'm working with Herkimers, I usually take 3. I like to work with a trinity, and I'll usually take 3 of them that are little tiny ones and hold them. And here's another thing too, is that if let's say you are doing some kind of work with that. In my opinion, the best way to go about it is if you want to receive the stone's energy. This is how I do it. I don't even remember where I learned this, but it's definitely worked for me. If you want to receive the stone's energy, you hold it in your non-dominant hand. Like I'm right-handed, so I hold them in my left hand when I'm trying to get the energy from those gemstones. If I'm trying to push the energy out, if I'm trying to release something, or if I'm trying to send it elsewhere, or even to say you're a healer of sorts, then you would put the stones in your dominant hand, because that's where the energy is going to come out. Okay, so I really do enjoy meditating with Herkimer diamonds sitting in my left hand, my non-dominant hand. Okay, now the next one I'm going to talk about is this right here, is blue lapis, or lapis lazuli, which is a beautiful stone, super protective, very, very protective stone, and resonates beautifully with the sign of Sagittarius. There's all kinds of stones, even citrine, and one of these days I'll make a video about citrine. There's some interesting things about citrine. Well, I'll just leave that there. Citrine can be nice, but just know that citrine is often not even technically citrine. Okay, so there's that. I think I will leave that there. If you would like to schedule an astrology reading, please do visit erinwageastrology.com. You can schedule straight through my website. I do hope to hear from some of you, and until next time, namaste to all of you.